Let's put the picture in the frame, folks. Next up is Greg Colunga from NextAfter.
Hello. Hello. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous. I was nervous when I was told that I was gonna be speaking today, and I'm even more nervous now because I'm following Brian and I'm before Michael. So give me a little grace today. Thank you. My name's Greg Colunga, and we're talking about the eighth wonder of the world and its impact on your mission. So there's a little bit of a debate about this internally at our office. We were talking about it, and there's about half the office that said, well, I think it was Warren Buffett that said it. And I said, well, I think Albert Einstein said it. And a quick Google search kind of solved that. And I think, we don't know if this is true or not. I think a lot of stuff gets attributed to him, but I found this really funny picture. So I'm going to say it's Albert. But there's this quote that he had, or at least that was attributed to him, that said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and he who understands it earns it. And there's one last line in there that we'll come back to in just a moment at the end of the talk. But before we talk about that, just a quick show of hands. How many people in here have a 401k that they're actively contributing to? All right, lots of hands. All right, so why do we like 401ks? Because of compound interest, probably, right? Employer matches, free money, that kind of stuff. But when the money goes into the marketplace, it gets invested in those funds, and it's producing compound interest for you. And the other thing that you expect with a 401k is that the returns are going to come in a longer period of time, right? Over the course of an entire career, hopefully everyone is able to get to that retirement day and have a nice little nest egg that they can retire for the rest of their lives and have a comfortable quality of life. Inside of your 401k, you may know this, you may not, but there's lots of different types of funds that are available inside of that. One is a stock index fund, but even if you don't have a stock index fund and you don't pay too much attention to that, you may know or own stocks or do day trading or something similar or of the like. When a company produces profits and distributes those profits to its shareholders periodically, they do so in the form of what's called a dividend, okay? And those dividends can be withdrawn, they could be put into a bank account, or they could be reinvested. And if they're reinvested, this is what's known as DRIP, or dividend reinvestment plan, okay? And this is a very common tactic that's used in strategic wealth investment. And you can see here on this chart, over a 30 or so year period of time, if you're constantly withdrawing the earnings from the dividends as a shareholder out of the marketplace, that represents the blue line, which is, we'll call that the control. The red line calls for you to just reinvest the value of the dividend in additional shares. And what that does is it starts to stack up compound interest over time to the tune of about 1.5% to 3.5% returns over that long period of time. And the idea here is you're producing results, you're reinvesting as those results are earned in additional shares that hold value, and this is creating that compound interest. And obviously the green hockey stick there is a 4% additional reinvest. So every time you take a dividend, you put 4% more back in. And that is really where things take off. And as we were talking about this with a handful of clients who are asking us, how do we build our program? How do we really scale and grow in a material way? We asked ourselves, okay, well, how does any of this have anything to do with fundraising? And the answer is, it has a lot to do with it. We've come to find out. But to make this work in nonprofit fundraising, you must unlearn what you have learned. Because all of us are taught as fundraisers that we are given a bag of money. That bag of money is investable, and we can only invest what's in that, right? So we think, we are naturally taught by the organization or just culturally to think, hey, we're going to spend up to our budget. If we come in a little less, then we get a pat on the head. We did a good job. And instead, what I would say that we should think is, let's invest all of our budget in our earnings right now as we're producing that, if we want to materially grow in a profound way. And so what does this look like in practice? This is where I was told I just need to go into the spreadsheet and have a bunch of spreadsheety stuff. So I try to make it look a little nicer. But basically, this is a very mathy portion of my talk, right? So let's say this organization invests $1.2 million in acquisition spending and media spending to go reach prospective subscribers, new donors. And in that investment process, if they're running at a 0.7 ROI or ROAS, then they're going to produce $840,000 in revenue. And in exchange, they're also going to produce 15,000 donors in this particular model. And what this calls for is essentially looking at not just the 1.2 and spending up to that, but then taking the 840 and reinvesting that. Because that 840, if we can hold the line on the ROI, is going to produce 10,000 more donors and 588,000 more dollars. And then if we take that and do it again, then that $588,000 in revenue becomes the new spend, which produces a $411,000 and 7,300 more donors, right? And you just kind of do this again and again and again until all that revenue that you're producing from the investment is now completely reinvested. And the difference between the two organizations is pretty staggering when you look at it side by side. Now the spend goes up pretty dramatically, but that spend is only increasing based upon the production that you're producing, right? The revenue that's coming back. But look at the difference between the two different organizations, right? Things get really nuts when you start adding in long-term return estimates as well. So when you bring LTV to the party, what happens? So we're just going to use some simple math here, and let's say lifetime value of a donor is worth $300 over the course of 3 to 5 years worth of subsequent giving. And when you put those two numbers side by side based upon the number of donors, that's when things get really, really crazy, right? So the original investment of $1.2 million in the 15,000 donors would have produced an LTV of $4.5 million. Whereas if you continue to reinvest to the maximum ability, right, based on all the revenue production, putting that back in under this drip methodology, you're going to end up with 49,000, roughly 50,000 donors, and produce $10 million more in LTV for your mission. And think about what kind of impact compounding interest can have on your program. Now there's a couple things. Obviously, as I just mentioned, this is a tripling of the number of donors by reinvesting. And this, just keep in mind, this might be the maximum amount that you can reinvest from your earnings. But if you're not reinvesting all of it to the maximum potential, certainly we can make an argument to invest more of the earnings that we've gotten as we're producing them. But the maximum potential for this particular model, based upon where these numbers were for this organization, is a 3x increase in the number of donors, which is the multiplier against that lifetime value. Everything will hinge on this strategy working on your ROI. So as you scale and grow, and if you can maintain that ROI that you're producing today, that's where the donor production is really going to come from. That allows for the reinvestable revenue production that you're creating from that many more donors. And that LTV will explode proportionate to the amount of donors that you're producing. And the thing here is, this is not just a theory, right? We had this conversation with a client a number of years ago. In 2020, they made the commitment to this model, and they began using this drip methodology in their acquisition, media budget and planning, and that produced a 229% increase in revenue and proportionate growth in terms of donors, email subscribers, and the LTV value of those donors is maintaining. So we're seeing consistent scale over that period of time for that organization. It's fantastic. It really has taken them to the next level. So back to our friend Albert, right? So compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. The last line here, though, is really critical, and that is, he who doesn't pays it. So if you remember anything from this talk, this very mathy talk, it's this. Don't pay for acquisition, invest in it. Thank you.